Alright, so today we're starting 1-3 histograms and stem and leaf plots, and we're going to take some notes first. So the first thing is a frequency table. A frequency table records the number of times a response occurs. So we're looking at a teacher's test score data from her classroom, and no one scored between 0 and 50, so we're going to leave that one blank. But 51 to 60, one student got a grade in there. 61 to 70, 2 students. 71 to 80 was also 2 students. 81 to 90 was 8 students. And then 91 to 100 was 4 students.
You have to do things like that.
Yeah. Yep. So you do 4 tally marks and then a slash through for the 5th one. That way, if you have a whole bunch, you can just count them by 5s. So we use tally marks in a frequency table, and you're just literally recording how many people got those scores for each section. And we're going to use this information to make our next 2 graphs. So number 2, bar graph. We're going to talk about bar graphs and histograms. The difference between those two is that in a bar graph, there are space between the bars, and you'll see what I mean in a second. We're going to label our bar graph frequency on the side and test scores on the bottom. And when you make a chart or a bar graph, remember, so it is valid, it has to start at 0 in both directions. So I'm going to do every half line for this way. I'm going to go up to 10. Okay, and then in the other direction, I'm going to write my test score values. And then we're just going to shade in the bar graph according to our data in the previous chart that we made. So between 0 and 50, I had nobody. Between 51 and 60, I had 1. So I'm going to use the 51 and 60, and I'm just going to shade up one little box. Now remember, bar graphs have space between the bars, so I don't want my bars to be touching. In 61 to 70, there were 2 kids. So I'm going to draw my bar up to the number 2. I think 71 to 80 also had 2. '81 to 90 had 8, which is up here. Bless you. And then 91 to 100 had 4. Alright, so this is a bar graph because there is space between each of my bars. Okay, so there is our bar graph with the space in between our bars. And now we're going to do histograms, which means the bars in the graph touch each other. So you'll notice at the bottom we wrote our numbers a lot closer together this time so that the bars can actually touch each other. So in the 0 to 50 range, I have no one. In the 51 to 60, I have 1. Then I have 2. Okay, so notice no space between my bars. They're all touching each other. And then I have 8, so I'm going all the way up here. And the last one I had 4. Last thing is stem and leaf plots. And so the information that we're looking at is the number of shirts sold daily at this store. And stem and leaf plots have 2 sides. They have a stem side, which is usually the tens or even more than tens place. And they have a leaf side, which is going to be your ones place. Okay? Sometimes the stem side will include hundreds and even thousands and whatever you want. So that's why I say tens usually, but sometimes more. but the leaf is always going to be your ones. And at the bottom of a stem and leaf, they're going to give you a little key. They're going to say, if it's written like this, and they're going to tell you how much that equals. So if you see 4 on one side and 3 on the other, that means 43 shirts. Okay, so we have 4 place values here for the stem side. We have the 40s, the 70s, the 80s, and the hundreds. And then on the leaf side, it's going to fill in all the ones place values that we have for each number. So for the 70s, we have 72, 73, 74. We have 3 75s. So we're going to write 3 5s down. And we have 2 79s. So we're going to write 2 9s down in the 70s row. Okay, so each of those little numbers stands for a value. In the 80s row, we have 2 80s. And we have an 83 and an 84. And notice I'm trying to line my numbers up. So when you are writing your values down, the columns of numbers need to be lined up perfectly, because the point of a stem and leaf plot is to see which tens place or hundreds place has the most values. So we can quickly look at this and tell, oh, most of the values are in the 70s. All right, and that's our purpose. And then we have 102. There's only 1 there. We have 3 more words today with our vocabulary, and the first one is outliers. Outliers are values that are much greater or much less than the rest of your data. And so in this stem and leaf plot, does anyone see what an outlier might be? In this data, 43 would be considered an outlier because it's so much far below the rest of my data. All right. So example 43. So clusters would be isolated groups of values. That might be if, for example, like the 75s in this group. There's a whole group of 75s. That's a little cluster of its own. So that would be an example of cluster. Last word today is gaps, which are large spaces in your data. So for example, from 43 to 72 would be a gap. And we're going to do some examples now. Okay, so this is from page 18 in the book, and they give us this information in that little chart at the top. It says number of pets per family, and then they give us all these numbers. So I see that the pet ranges for families go from 0, okay, that was really weird. Go from 0, let's try that again, to 5. So that's what I'm going to write down. And then in the frequency table, I'm going to write the frequency that those numbers occur. So how many zeros are in my little chart up here?
6, 7.
Good, 7. So remember, we're making tally marks. So 7 tally marks for 0. How many ones?
1s.
I got 9. And 2s? I got 5. I got 1 3, is that right? 1 4 and 1 5. Okay, so I do cross the numbers out as I put the information in my table. That way I make sure I don't forget anything. The frequency table, because number 1 says use a frequency table to make a histogram of the data. So now that we made the frequency table, it'll be real easy to make the histogram. So you're going to draw another box. And the side of our box is going to be our frequency, again, and the bottom is going to be what? Come on, people.
Pets.
Yes, thank you. Number of pets. So now we've drawn our numbers on, so we can go ahead and draw our histogram. And it said histogram, so are my bars touching or not touching?
Not touching.
Histogram.
Touching.
Touching. Histogram, the bars touch. So 0, there were 7 people that had 0 pets. For 1, I had 9 people that had 1 pet. Remember, my bars have to touch, so I'm trying to space them out so that they touch each other. There are 5 people that have 2 pets. And 1 for 3, 4, and 5. So there we go. All right, so there's our histogram with this data. 2 says, how many families own 2 to 3 pets? So look at your information. How many families own 2 to 3? 5. What? 2 to 3. Like 2 or 3. 6. Okay. How many families own more than 3 pets? More than 3. 2. Good. To the nearest percent, what percent of families own no pets? So how many families own no pets? 7. And how many families are involved in this survey altogether? We have to count that up real quick. People own 0 pets out of 24 total people that were in this survey. So we're going to just divide that out to get the percentage. And that equals 29%. Okay? So write that down. And name the median, mode, and range of the data. Median, mode, and range. So which number appears the most in our data? 1. Again, the median's 1, the mode is 1, and then the range, we do what? The biggest number from the smallest number. The range is 5 because we're just looking at the number of pets to find the range. And that's all we have time for today, so we will practice more on this tomorrow.